We have a lot to cover in the hour, so I'll go ahead and jump in with a few bits of information here. My name is Lynn Lucas. I'm with the Children at Risk Early Education team, and I am here with Kim Coffrin. She is the Executive Director of Early Education at Children at Risk. And we are so excited to talk with you today about the state of early education in Texas. This is our Spring Texas tour, and we do this twice a year, once in person and once virtually. We always have some new bits of information to share with you, and that is the same today. Um, our time together will be divided into three different sections. The first section is quality. I'll escort you through the quality portion. Kim will then escort us through the access section, which will talk about childcare deserts and some new information about chronic childcare deserts. And then Kim will escort us through a policy section. We welcome your participation, either come offline or in the chat at any time. You're welcome to ask questions or make comments. We will have a time to pause at the close of each section, and we'll pull up a Zoom poll just to kind of get some thought juices flowing a little bit. So we welcome you to do that. Our mission at Children at Risk is to serve as a catalyst for change to improve the quality of life for children through 5 different things. That includes strategic research, public policy analysis, education, collaboration, and advocacy. And we appreciate the work that you also do in those areas. Here's the rest of our early childhood team, people that do work both in front of and behind the scenes. And we could not do this work without them or without you. So thank you for being here and for all the work that you do for children in your part of the world. If you're not already a part of the Prenatal to 3 Collaborative, we do invite you to join this effort. It's a statewide effort with many organizations across the state that span healthy beginnings, supported families, and early care and education. Grab that QR code and it will let you register for the newsletter. We have a quarterly meeting where we talk about things like the sunset recommendations, interim charges, and then prepare for the 90th legislative session. Speaking of QR codes and slides, you will get a copy of the slide deck that will be sent email after our time together today, along with many other resources that will be mentioned. So if there's something that you want that's on the slide deck and you can't quite grab it, don't worry, you will get a copy of it. So with that, let's dive on into quality. So we know that 40% of all Texas zip codes qualify for childcare deserts, and that Kim, do I have the right one here? I just want to check real quick before I dive in. I'll just continue to go forward and we'll figure it out if it's not. Sometimes
You
this
can
particular
you can skip this one. So
sometimes that slide shows up a little bit later. So
no
like,
worries.
what am I doing here? I mean, I was prepared to talk about it, but you might want it later. So investments in quality funds. What we're looking at is the difference between quality dollars that was spent through our workforce boards, through TWC, in 2023 board calendar year, and in 2024 board calendar year. The 2024 board calendar year ended in September of 2025. So just kind of let that settle in your head for a moment. Each workforce board receives a certain percentage of funds that are intended that must be spent on quality efforts. As a state, we do this through Texas Rising Star, our quality rating system specific to subsidy providers. And so it is interesting to look at the difference. Texas Rising Star was not new in 23, but there was a shift between 23 and 24 in that once 2024 hit, that was the year when participation in Texas Rising Star became mandatory for all subsidy providers. And so if you accept government subsidies and children who are on scholarships for childcare, you are mandated to participate in the quality rating system. So this is all new, some new onboarding. And so these show us the broad categories in which those funds could be expended. You can see it's infant, toddler, professional development, Texas Rising Star supports, health and safety, evaluation assessment, national accreditation, and then other. A couple of things to note on here. We can see some big shifts in funds most notably from the Texas Rising Star Supports category, where in 23, 81% of quality dollars were spent in the Texas Rising Star Supports in 2024. Still a lot of focus there, but almost down by half, focusing on those funds by 42% in that area. And a little bit of a shift to professional development, a little bit of a shift in infant toddler, but we saw most of the shift was over to this other category. What is the other category you are curious about? Don't worry, we're going to talk about the subcategories in just a moment. So we'll have an opportunity to dig into each of these and look at what the subcategories are. I do want to note that for most workforce boards, we did notice that that there was a lot more spent in this other category. This is pretty similar, actually, what we see across the state for most workforce boards. There were a couple that didn't spend very much at all in this other category and really focused in other places. A lot of workforce boards did increase the focus on the infant toddler area. And as you can see, there's still, and in all the workforce board areas, there still is a lot of focus on this Texas Rising Star Supports part, which we'll look at some of those details here in just a moment. So what you see here is all 28 workforce boards are listed at the bottom here, from the Panhandle all the way through the Gulf Coast there at the right side. This is the icons reflect that expenditure, that there was investment in that area for that workforce board. This doesn't tell you how much, it just tells you that there was focus in that area. And so we can see the star is TRS supports, the little book there is professional development, the rattle is infant toddlers, the shield is health and safety, the open book is evaluation assessment, the teddy bear is other, and the check mark is national accreditation. The national accreditation is going to be NAC or NAEYC supports. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what happens there. And you can also see that some workforce boards like South Texas here, they're focusing, oh, actually, let me go over to North Texas. Well, they're both. I'll stick with South Texas. They both focused on TRS supports, professional development, and infant toddler. So they focus theirs in a little bit more in a focused way. Some of these are a little bit more diverse. So for example, we can see Texoma that they really focused on all of those things. It really just depended on what that local workforce board area determined that they needed. And it's different from one place to another. And so it's important that individual areas are able to look at their communities and invest in ways that they think will be most helpful to them. Okay, so now we're going to look at over here at the TRS supports, and we can see some of the sub categories here. These include equipment, materials and resources, curriculum, outdoor learning, which is usually outdoor equipment, TRS mentor salaries. That's additional funds to support TRS mentors, family engagement, and TechPeds SME, which is Texas Early Education Professional Development System subject matter expert. So it's a bit of a mouthful there, but that's the extra support that was needed to help onboard new teachers into the TechPed system. All programs that are a part of Texas Rising Star are also required to participate in the TechPed system. That's a place where all the professional development is noted and housed. Each teacher's or professional's career pathway can also be found there. And so it's a good place to store that information. And by the way, licensing can also get information there and see where people are with their professional development. So let's look at infants and toddlers here. We can see that there's different subcategories here also that are infant toddler specific. So this included curriculum and materials, professional development, outdoor early learning for infants and toddlers specifically. Some of those were like shade structures, expansion grants. Those were to expand the number of infant toddler slots that were available, sometimes adding a classroom. the Infant Toddler Specialist Network, which focuses on making sure that people in that network have a high understanding of development within the infant and toddler age group, and then evaluation and assessment. Most people who spent money in this area invested in curriculum materials and professional development, which is great because those should go together. If you're going to get the equipment and materials, you want to know how to use it, and as a part of your teaching strategy. There are a lot of ways to offer professional development, training, conferences, through CDA support, TRS orientation, college scholarships, and apprenticeships. And again, different workforce areas have access to different levels of quality within all of these approaches for professional development. For example, some areas have apprenticeships. Many areas don't have access to apprenticeships. Some areas have really strong so extra supports for college scholarships. So maybe they don't need to use their local workforce board money for that in particular. And so it's important that workforce board areas have the ability to make those decisions for themselves. Again, you can see that some, like Concho Valley here, they really focused all on trainings, while others like North Central Texas, that looks like they were able to have a very diversified approach to their professional development. They invested in all of these categories. So statewide spending, this is that other category where 35% of quality dollars were spent in the other category this year, in 2024, excuse me. And most of those funds were wage supplements. This is actually one of the most interesting things about comparing the data from last year, from 2023 to 2024 board calendar year, is the shift to the wage supplements. What this looked like was retention bonuses for teachers who were a part of the Texas Rising Star system. It looked like recognized qualifications. And so if a teacher got her degree or certificate that helped the program then be able to reach their Texas Rising Star certification, they may have received a bonus. Also, a lot of wage supplements that were directly tied to that program earning their Texas Rising Star 3 or 4. There were some workforce boards that had a scale that just depended on people got bonuses at different levels, depending if their program reached Texas Rising Star level 2, 3, or 4, with level 4 being the highest quality of program. So it's just really interesting to see by each workforce board what that looked like, because different workforce boards did do some different things, and there were some that didn't choose to use their funds that way at all, but most did. Most of that 35% went into that space. Other ways that the other category could be represented include pre-K partnerships and childcare management services support, which supports accounting, record keeping, that sort of a thing. The Texas Rising Star program, as I just mentioned, rates by star level, with star level 2 being the entry level and star level 4 being the highest level. You know, I say Texas Star 2 being the entry level, but that's not really the case. It's just it's the lower star level. And so it's just the quality of program increases as the star level increases. What we see here is the difference between 2023 and 2024. 23 is the gray column, 24 is the red column. And we can see that in every single star area, there was an increase between the years. This is good. We're trying to make sure that we have all programs on board. We also see that the greatest growth was in Texas Rising Star 4. This is also good. The greatest amount of growth in the quality level is at that highest level of quality, Texas Rising Star 4. Now, when programs have their assessment and they go through that and then they're given a rating, they don't have to come in at Texas Rising Star 2. When the assessment happens, the rating, the observations occur, the assessment is completed, and they're given that rating based on the snapshot of that particular visit and how they're looking on that day. So it's very possible, and also likely probable, looking at the numbers here, that a lot of programs actually came in at Texas Rising Star 4. So very good for them. one thing that we're asking communities when we have conversations like this is, what is your plan now? What are your goals for this next year? Is it to maintain where you're at with your star level? Is it to increase that star level? Does your community still have a lot of new programs to onboard? What are the goals? What does that look like? And how do you make conscious decisions about how to invest to make sure that you reach those goals? Paving the way to quality is an analysis that takes a much deeper dive than what I've just done here today. But it lets you know a little bit more about what the statewide analysis looks like. It also includes a pullout report for each of the 28 workforce board areas. And so if you want the detail for the workforce board that you live in or that you're interested in, or that you're just curious about. They're all available to you. So look at all 28 if you'd like to. They're actually pretty interesting to look at if you're into this kind of stuff. And so grab that QR code. You can reach that you can find that information there. And with that, I'm going to take a pause here to take any questions, comments, and I'm going to get a poll up here for us and ask you also to participate in this poll. What this poll is asking is it's asking you, what do you think in your area? You can answer this specifically for your area or for the state. What do you think the biggest barrier to quality is? It's just asking you what's the the largest barrier, the second largest, third, et cetera, et cetera. So, so if you'll give that a look real quick. Kim, while they're doing that, let me ask you, what were your thoughts about the 2023 to 2024 differences in quality and expenditures?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I think the this is the second year that we've done that report, right? So the first year that we did it, we were going in blind and really like looking at what were workforce boards spending their dollars on and how what did that look like in general. And so this year we were really able to look at the differences and to see workforce boards actually make shifts and understanding as they as it makes sense that if you put a lot of money into buying curriculum for the various centers and childcare programs, you wouldn't do that the second year, right? You would shift your money. So one to see that change actually happen is exciting. And I think the big takeaway was that increase in that other bucket that you talked about, and seeing that increase, knowing that the majority of the funds in that other bucket were some form of wage supplement, is really interesting to see. We lost the ARPA dollars in 23 that were supporting a lot of the wage supplements that various programs were implementing at that point. And so workforce boards to recognize that in 24 and figure out what they can do. Part of it is not going to solve the compensation issues that we have in early childhood, but at least it's some recognition and some way of doing that. So I think that is the biggest takeaways.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And we can see, I'll just share what we have so far. And this mimics a lot of what we saw across the state. So we can see here salary and benefit levels. That by far was easily I don't know if I call it the winner, but the largest barrier that people recognize across the state in terms of quality. The level of applicants, that's the next one on here. That came up in a lot of workforce board areas too. I do think it's interesting that the details of this poll outside of the salary and benefit levels, it did differ between workforce board areas. Some areas, the ones that had more rural communities, they had also less access to some quality supports and sometimes to staff, quality staff, and the professional development and education that it takes to help make sure that staff are really prepared. Other things that Kim will talk a little bit more about later have to do with issues related to turnover with licensing staff and just overburdens of administrative work. And so you can look forward to learning a little bit more about that from her. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kim, right now.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lynn. Beautiful. All right. Well, the next section we are going to talk about our childcare deserts. This is new data that we just released this spring. We are have Children at Risk has been collecting and tracking childcare deserts for almost 9 years since 2017. And during that time frame, we've really focused on those first three um, classifications of deserts. So the very first one, that generic one, is the basic childcare deserts, and this is a zip code where there's at least 30 children under the age of 6. Where the demand is 3 times larger than the supply, and so where there is the gap of those, so that's what our typical childcare deserts are: all children, all programs under the age of 6, etc. We then drill down and look at subsidy childcare deserts, and this is looking at those same zip codes, same 30 children or more, but really looking at low income families and where the greatest needs are for them. And we define low income as families that meet their annual income is below that 200% of federal poverty line, is where our definition is. We then drill down to the third level, which is our Texas Rising Star deserts. And this is really looking at those quality measures of, like, okay, now we know the number of children in our low income families, then comparing it with when we filter in and look at just programs that are in those Texas Rising Star 3 or 4 levels, and where are those deserts. And so we go from a very wide lens to a more narrow lens as we go through those three. This year, we have added a component, what we are calling the chronic childcare deserts. And these are those same zip codes in all three areas that have been a zip code or have been a desert for at least 3 years or more. We've been tracking since 2017. We are now far enough away from the pandemic, where we saw a huge dip and then a huge bump. And with the influx of money that we had into the system. And so now we're kind of back into the new normal. And so that's when we're able to really look at, see what are deserts at long term. When we think about a child's life and that 0 to 5 span, 3 years is a big chunk for them to lack that high quality childcare that they deserve and their families are counting on. So let's look at that first one. The first one is really looking at the overall deserts. So across the state, we have 995, almost 995,000 seats available across the state, which is up just slightly from last year. We had about an increase of around 3,000 seats, which the prior year we saw a decrease of 75,000 seats. So we are excited to see that we are at least holding firm. We obviously didn't bounce as way back, but we aren't losing at this moment across the state in general. So what that did for our deserts, we went from 420 deserts last year, and now we are at about 413 deserts across the board. So again, that's all things equal, all children, all capacity. When we drill down and look at our subsidy, so our low income families, we have about 149,000 seats, so much less than the 995,000, which means our desert zip codes increased. So we more than doubled our increase from our overall. So we had 413 in the overall, and we had 884 when we look at subsidy. And when we look at those numbers, you see those two arrows that we increased our seats slightly this last year, which is great. But we also increased our deserts, right? So like logic would say those two numbers should go in opposite directions. If we increased seats, our desert should go down. And so when those numbers are going in the same direction, it makes us think and go, I wonder what's really going on here. What happened? And so when we dug in, what we kind of found was a couple different things that why those deserts are still going up when we look at low income families. Three things have kind of happened in a combination of ways. One is zip codes that weren't a desert last year because they didn't have 30 children in them are now classified as a desert because they meet that 30 children threshold, and their supply didn't change. their supply of childcare. So they either didn't have childcare before or very little, but now they're a desert, or now they're meet that 30 number of children, and so that they're now a desert. Another what reason is uh, growth outpaced demand, and so we increased number of children as well, or we saw growth. The subsidy seats grew in areas that weren't deserts to begin with. So we increased our subsidy seats, but they weren't in the pockets that really needed an increase in subsidy. That zip code already had a lot of childcare for subsidy, and so that increase didn't help where those deserts are. And then across the state, we did see pockets that lost childcare. We know childcare centers have closed over the years. So if that happened in communities that weren't zip codes before and now are, and et cetera. So all those factors really play into why those numbers go the way they are. It's not just a simple one to one. These numbers go up, these numbers go down. There's some more nuance in that. And that's true too when we look at the Texas Rising Star numbers. We know that our Texas Rising Star numbers went up because more programs participate in Texas Rising Star. I'll show you a graph here in a second of where those participations are. But as we live into the mandatory Texas Rising Star requirement, more of our programs in that subsidy bucket are going to reach that Texas Rising Star level, where we know before there was a wider gap. Deserts are still prominent. We have 938 Texas Rising Star deserts across the state. And those factors I just explained with subsidy also play into the Texas Rising Star. Did the growth happen in the communities that needed it the most? Is the number of children outpacing the number of seats available for supply? Those are all things that factor into those deserts. When we look at chronic deserts, there it goes. This is again our new classification of deserts. And so this is really looking at all three of those levels of deserts and understanding which zip codes have been a desert for 3 or more years consecutively. And again, like I said, when you think about a child's life in that 0 to 5 space, 3 years is a big chunk of their life. And it's not only important to the child's development and making sure they're prepared and have the environments and the experiences and the language and all the things that are important in that early childhood brain development, is not only important for their growth and their long-term success, but also for that family. If I live in a childcare desert and don't have reliable childcare, I can't get a steady job. I can't go for that promotion. I can't do those things to really bring my family's economic status up as well. And so it's detrimental to both the child as well as the family's economic status, which then ultimately leads to detrimental for us as a society and the Texas economy as a whole, and all the things that then that plays into. So where are we across the state? We are sitting at right in that 60% threshold of deserts. We have about 64% of our overall deserts, our 263 are chronic. 63% of our subsea deserts, 558, are chronic. They've been deserts for more than 3 years. And then our Texas Rising Star deserts are at 68%. So just a little bit higher than the other ones. So right in that 60%, which means this is something that's not just a one-off, oh, they'll get childcare next year. This is something that families are dealing with year after year and really struggling to find the care that they need for them and their families. So what does that look like across the state? And where are we? Number of seats wide. So this is our one graph that looks at the longitudinal look at where we have been tracking childcare deserts for the last several years. This graph starts in 2021. So you can see in 2020, we saw that big dip in that red line. We're starting from 55 seats. This is the number of seats per 100 children of working families. So all children, that top line is all children, all families. So we saw that big bump up to 98. So we had 98 seats per 100 children in 2022. We had that influx of funds that really supported childcare. Surprise, the ARPA dollars worked. And then the ARPA dollars went away. We kind of settled back into last year we were at 87 seats per 100 children, and this year we're at 86. And that's right where we were before the pandemic. We were right in that mid 80s level overall. So again, overall, you're thinking we have 86 seats per 100 children of working families. We're doing okay, except we know there's an oversaturation of childcare in certain zip codes and an undersaturation of childcare in other zip codes, which cause our deserts. So it's not equitable when we actually get on the ground and really look at those communities. That middle line is our subsidy. So we have there's a big gap there. We're only sitting at 26 seats per 100 low income working families compared to the 86. And that bottom line is Texas Rising Star. As we live in Texas, mandatory Texas Rising Star, those numbers are going to get closer. So we're at 23 seats. And so that gap that we've closed between subsidy and TRS, now we need to close it between low income families and all families, right? When we've got a long way to go, making sure that we are reaching that higher level of capacity for children and families to give them the choices that they deserved and so forth. This slide is one of my favorite slides. This is really looking at the growth of Texas Rising Star, and what does that mean for providers and what does that mean for children. So we are now at 74, almost 75% of all of our providers that take subsidy are in Texas Rising Star. This again is a statewide number. Which is super exciting on that piece. And this graph shows as of September of 24, so just a year, we can see that growth. But remember, for those of us that have been in the field for a long time and remember before Texas Rising Star was mandatory, that number sat around 30%. That 30% of our programs were in Texas Rising Star of all the programs that were taking subsidy. And so now we're at 75%, which just warms my heart to know those programs are serving children at a higher level. And the next part of that slide is on the right side is really looking at the number of children. Out of all the children receiving scholarships from Texas Workforce Commission and their local workforce boards, 82% of them are in a Texas Rising Star program. In some communities, that's closer to 95% of their children are in Texas Rising Star community programs, which just is exciting. That's why why we do this work. That is why that mandatory TRS happened, is because we want children to be in high quality programs, and it's working. We're at 82%, so that is super exciting. We've also been tracking family home and childcare home providers since before the pandemic as well. They have not bounced back since before. You can kind of see where they were in 2019, and then the big crash in 21. Childcare centers have bounced back and they're kind of where they were before, but our family childcare homes have not. And so we are still sitting at a 22% decrease of family childcare homes than we were before the pandemic. We saw a little bit of an increase this year, which is good news, but we still have a long way to go. And we know these guys are a vital part of our infrastructure. They are important for families of infants and toddlers. Many times they want a smaller, more intimate environment for their babies. They are also important for families who need non-traditional hour care, where they can work evenings and weekends or early mornings. Family childcare providers are more apt to be able to flex their hours and adjust the time of care with those families as needed. So that is another an area that we are looking at. And then the final slide before I show you the map is really looking at, this is looking at all children under the age of 6, under the age of 6, 0 to 5, low income children. Only 1 in 4, about 26% of children are able to receive a scholarship or subsidies from Texas Workforce Commission. There's not enough money in the system to serve more. So even though we potentially have the capacity to serve more at programs, there's not enough funding for those scholarships. And so we can do better than this. And this is partly because of we're limited to what we receive from the feds on the money that we can get. Texas did invest $100 million last year of unused TANF dollars to support more kids and scholarships, but we need to do better. We know that's still not going to reach the level that we really want to reach on for those families to make the choices that they want. Okay, so Lynn, if you'll stop sharing, I am going to pull up the map and show you some new features that we have. Um, um, on the map. And Lynn, did you see my note about the updated slide deck?
Yes.
Okay. Um, made a last minute change. Um, uh, okay, so this is our interactive childcare map. So if you go to our website and go under research and hit childcare deserts, you'll come to this map and you can click on view map. Um, there it goes. Um, it likes me this week. It usually takes a minute to load. But this is our interactive dashboard that you can filter and play with. And we added a couple things this year. So we added this box here, this on the right, which labels our chronic childcare desert. So you can see that 263 chronic childcare deserts are there. You can also scroll down and look at the map, and you can see the deserts that are outlined in that thicker font. Those are also chronic childcare deserts. So you can kind of just get a visual for where the chronic childcare deserts are across the state or in your area. You can also toggle on this little button over here. And if you toggle off of that, you can see the chronic childcare desert designation goes away. The data is still there, it's just not showing up on the map. And so you can see where those are. You also can look at view of childcare providers specifically and look at different communities across the board. And then you've got some filters over here that you can look at if you want to look at specifically 2-star or 3-star programs. If you want to get rid of those and just look at NACE accreditation, see where those programs are, you can kind of filter it and drill down into that area. The other thing that you can do is choose your county, choose your boundaries, excuse me. So you can do workforce board area, and you can see all 28 different workforce boards. You can do county areas, and then and there's all the 253, 256, something like that, number of counties in Texas. So you can look at Bexar County specifically, San Antonio, or you can look at Travis and Austin, or Tarrant and Fort Worth, and it will all will pull up the different demographics for you. You can also do zip codes and look at zip codes. Oh, I have to do this. I have to do zip codes up here. See, there we go. Um, and I can look at the zip code. There's no deserts in that zip code. That's my zip code, and I can attest there's more childcare here than needs to be. So, but you can look at different zip codes that you need to that. You can also look at Senate and House districts and different communities around Texas there as well. School districts. Oops, I'm going to say school districts. And you can look at different. Let's do Austin, and you can see where those deserts are in those areas. So I'm going to go back to the general map and click everybody for the state. So now we're back to our overall numbers. And then up here, you can also click on subsidy. You can also look at Texas Rising Star. And then over here, you can also look at your overtime numbers. And so this gives you statewide data. And if you have filters over here, you can also look at workforce board areas, and I will choose Greater Dallas. And so you can see the comparison of as your whatever community you chose and the state. And then we have a downloadable data feature there. So if you want to dig into the specifics, you can look into the data around that as well and download that piece. So, use the map, dig into it. Feel free to ask questions around it. We get excited about the data because we can look at it from a bird's eye view. But the really the part we get excited about is when you guys look at it, because you guys know those communities more than we do. You may be in a community and look at your chronic deserts and go, oh yeah, that's why that's a chronic. Because you know the specifics that are happening in that community, where we may not know the ins and outs of those details. So So that is that. We have a poll up for you um, to answer. This is really looking at the barriers of childcare and looking at what how you would rank those of what's really um, causing barriers to childcare. We'll
Basically,
give you a
I
few
make
minutes.
really big paintings about bodies and about.
Yes, Lynn, I made it to the current deck, so it should be good. Ellie, it's your question about uh, the deserts. Yeah, they are based off the capacity, so it doesn't factor in having, your capacity could be 150, but you as a program choose to have only 120 because you're doing lower ratios, or you're missing teachers and you don't have the teachers, and so therefore, so our deserts are what we consider conservative. It's probably worse than what it really is. But we're showing, but that's based off the data that we have. Yep, good question. All right, so Lynn shared the barriers to accessing childcare, and no surprise, B and C have been the number ones pretty much across the board when we've done this very highly scientific survey during our Texas tours. But cost of families and cost of doing business are barriers, and those are hand in hand, right? It's expensive to run childcare. It's a people business. And therefore those costs get passed on to parents or whoever the provider is. And so it's very telling that those things are happening. Those two things are combined. Um, uh, and then location of programs and not enough staff are a close third and fourth in that very again highly scientific poll. All right, let's jump into our next section around advocacy. Yes, okay, this is the right side. So making sure we have it. So with this information, we look at the quality dollars and the section that Lynn went over, and then we look at our childcare deserts, and then it really helps us inform that policy work to really understand how can we make changes in our early childhood ecosystems. So to kind of level set us, 47% of our zip codes across Texas are childcare deserts for low income children. Way too many, that's almost half. We know the cost to parents is astronomical, 10 to 50%, especially for infants and toddlers, of a family's annual earnings. We know the federal recommendations are for families to pay around 7% of their family's income. So we know that ratio and balance is off. And then we also know we can't do that on the backs of our educators when many of our early childhood workforce is 6 times likely to live in poverty more than our elementary or middle school teachers. And 43% of our educator households are already participating in one form of a public safety net already. And so I have used for the last couple years this what I call my tricycle for success analogy of how do we explain the early childhood system and how do we make sure that we're thinking about the whole system and not just a part of it. Our childcare deserts looks at that first back wheel, that brick and mortar. What is available? What capacity is there? And where are the children? And looks at that ratio and tells us where those are aligned and where they're not aligned. And that's where the that plays a factor into it. So and that's an important wheel. We got to have buildings. We got to have places for children to gather. But that front tire, the educators, if we don't have the educators to go in those buildings, we will have empty buildings. And so what kind of systems do we have in place to make sure that we have a pipeline of educators coming to the system? How are we making sure that they are compensated and want to stay in our early childhood system? What are we doing for the professional development? making sure that they have opportunities to engage in higher education and training that will serve them well and the children well. And that back wheel is affordability. Because if we have all the brick and mortar that we want and we are paying educators what we want, and what we want to pay them, what they need to be paid, what they should deserve to be paid, um, uh, then it's not affordable for parents, right? So how do we make sure those three things are aligned, and not all of our focus is on one area? And how do we make sure that we want to pay educators more? Great. How are we going to do that on not on the backs of families? But we also can't make it just affordable for families on the backs of our educators, right? So how do we balance those three? The frame of that tricycle is really around the rules and regulations. We have lots of different rules and regulations in Texas, as most states do. But how do we keep those three things in a line, no matter where that child's at, no matter where that educator is at? They know it and have a clear path of where that our tricycle is aligned and all moving in that right direction. Our pedals are our funding. That's what keeps us moving forward or stops us in our tracks, depending on where that funding is going, what level of funding is going. We know we can do more with more funding. The pandemic proved that. When we got more money in the system, we were able to serve more children. We also know we aren't serving enough children because there isn't enough funding in the system. So there's that piece. So, and all of us are in that driver's seat and really are trying to move us forward in that to make sure our tricycle is aligned and moving us forward. So what does that tricycle look like in Texas? And it is scattered all over the place. We are currently in 6 different state agencies. We have obviously Health and Human Services, which houses our child care regulation. It also has Family Support Services, 211, our early childhood intervention, so children with special needs under the age of 3, that all sits in Health and Human Services. Department of Family Protective Services, that's where child abuse, neglect in our intake offices, foster care, kinship. Department of State Health Services, obviously that's maternal child health. That is also our immunization tracker. So if you're a child care center, a licensed child care center in Texas, home or center, you're dealing with those 3 entities from the very beginning, right? At some point in time, you're dealing with obviously child care regulations, but you're dealing with the other 2 as well. If you choose to take subsidy and work with low income families, then you're working with the Texas Workforce Commission and your local workforce board that who has the child care subsidies or scholarships. They run the Texas Rising Star program, which is our quality rating improvement system. If you have a high population of low income kiddos, you may be on the child care and adult food program, which is housed at the Department of Ag, another entity of those pieces. And then if you're working with your pre-K population, you may be having a partnership with your local school district, or if you have a child with special needs that is 3 to 5, you might be working with your school district for some special ed services. So as a child care provider, you are dealing with at least 3, if not 6, different state agencies across the board. And so our tricycle frame can be really out of whack sometimes because we have contradicting things or multiple things happening at the same time. So what has happened in between now and then, and where are we? So we have 3 things that are happening in what we're calling our interim year. Our interim year is where we are currently not in legislative session. Sometimes people think, oh, we have a break, but no, there's a lot of work that happens during the interim as well. And 2 bills were passed last session, House Bill 117 and House Bill 4903. House Bill 117 set up a governor's task force on the governance of early childhood education and care, really trying to figure out those 6 agencies. Where can we align? What is a better way to make sure we're serving children and families more efficiently and giving providers the supports they need and not pulling them in 1,000 different directions? House Bill 4903 established a quad agency for child care initiatives. This one's really focused on streamlining regulations and making sure they're coordinated. Is what licensing said follows with what Texas Workforce Commission says. Where are those things, where are things duplicated? Where are things contradictory of each other? And how can we make it more streamlined, really thinking about the rules and regs? The third thing that is happening is our Sunset Review Commission. This is a standalone state agency. Their whole job is to basically audit other state agencies every 10 to 12 years. And this year, the Sunset Commission is reviewing 4 of our 6 state agencies: Department of Family Protective Services, Health and Human Services, Department of State Health Services, and the Workforce Commission. So those are 4 major, especially Health and Human Services and TWC are 2 of our major agencies that surround childcare. And so those are going through a process as well. All 3 of those right now are doing meetings. There's actually a meeting today on the governor's task force. Um, those are all happening right now, and discerning what information, where things aligned, where are things not working, what are recommendations to make it better. And they will all do reports by end of December or early January, all gearing up for potential legislations in January when we start our next session. So these all have potential to build on and potentially bring new laws, our new framework to our system and really make change. I jokingly say we have either all the stars have aligned for some big major change, or we've made the gods mad, and I'm not sure which. So we will see how this all goes. So in preparation to all of that, this is just a quick look of all the different agencies and how which ones apply to each of those things that are happening. With that in mind, and knowing that all those things were happening during the interim, last fall we did a statewide childcare survey, and we got 1,300 respondents across the state representing all 28 local workforce boards, which is fantastic. So for those of you that filled out the survey, thank you. We read through all the comments and analyzed all the details, and we appreciate your input. So we took those results, as well as our Texas tour that we did last fall that was in person in the 12 different communities that we go out to. We took those information as well, and we combined them into our recommendations and our big picture recommendations of where we are starting to have conversations around. This gives you a quick pick of 90% of our respondents were providers, about 2% were parents, 2% were after school providers, and 6 were other stakeholders. So again, if you filled out one of those surveys, thank you, we appreciate it. And so where did we really land on our recommendations, and where our conversations happening right now? So the first one really is around that governance and system-wide coordination. How do we design a purposeful, unified governance with system-wide coordination to improve efficiency and quality? We really need to identify a person, entity, agency with decision-making authority over all the programs. How can we really make this system that we're not getting this patchwork of regs and directions? Who's really thinking about the whole child, the whole family, and no matter what environment they're in, if it's childcare, family-based, center-based, faith-based, public school, who's really thinking about all of the children? We heard things. There's so many minimum standards. Things change constantly. The rules change depending if you're in public school or in childcare, depending on who's interpreting the rules. All those things get factored in, and so really wanting to make a more coordinated regulatory structure across agencies really is one of the main focuses. With that, efficiency, improve the efficiency of our local workforce boards, and better align their resources with today's population and community needs and economic realities. Those are all, our workforce board system was developed 30 years ago. Texas was a different place then. So does that still meet our needs? What does that look like? And how could we potentially make adjustments to better serve children and families? This next one's really on application and access streamlines. This is really focused on families and providers and all the paperwork that we have to fill out. This is the duplication of filling out paperwork for families. We've heard from families that they've had to fill out 20 pages of paperwork 5 different times for all the different programs, sometimes within the same agency, but they're different programs. So how do we streamline that piece? How do we make things more around eligibility? Some things are as of your family's income as of April 1st, some of them as of September 1st. So how can we better align there? And how do we make it more available for children and families on what is available for services? How can we make that more streamlined? So really, providers were asking for a single integrated system for families that they can apply once with renewals and know what services are out there for them and for the providers and knowing what that is. How many providers actually know there is a Texas workforce and a quality rating system and other resources on the other side of just licensing. So how do we make all those things more accessible for children and families? The next one's around regulatory and implementation alignment, synthesizing key regulations to reduce confusion and improve regulatory alignment. So how can we really think about that excess paperwork, the duplication of documentation, not shifting rules without warning? This is really around also inspectors who apply rules unevenly. One licensing rep will tell you one thing, you get a new one, it tells you something different. Your Texas Rising Star mentor says you need real things, real items in your classrooms, which is good for children, as we know. But a licensing rep may come in and say, oh, that's dangerous and is unsafe and write you up. So how can we make sure those things are aligned and those through training and make sure that duplication isn't happening and the contradiction of rules are happening. So really, how do we develop that more unified training and robust statewide collaboration across all of the regulatory entities and oversight? The last two are really around, one is around contracting and accountability and performance management, and the last one is around access for children with disabilities. So so back to contracting accountability, no surprise that if you're a child care provider or work with them in any capacity, no surprise that the Texas 3C, which is our child care management system that the state implemented in January of 25, was on providers' minds when we did the survey. There was lots of strong feelings about that less than ideal transition to the new system. It's been quite bumpy over the last 18 months. And so how do we make that system better? But also how do we hold not just providers accountable, but also workforce boards and contractors and the state accountable to make sure that system is aligned, and not just that system, but all of our systems. How do we make sure that that is all being played in? And then the last one is really around access for children with disabilities. For years, we continue to hear from childcare providers and families about just the need to improve access for children with disabilities, and how can we give them better services and know what services are out there. There is an increased differential rate from TWC to care for a child with special needs, but we know that that process is cumbersome and hard to get. We know there's a wait time to get a child assessed when a family is finally ready to get them assessed, both in ECI and in the public school. We know that transition from ECI to public school is bumpy and could be better streamlined. And so there's lots of things we can do to really improve children with disabilities. And in fact, last year there was a bill, House Bill 2310, that was passed that charges Texas Education Agency, Health and Human Services, and the Workforce Commission to really work together to improve learning opportunities for young children with disabilities. So they're supposed to develop a strategic plan by the end of the year. And so they have a survey that is out this coming right now. That's out. It's open till Sunday. So if you are a provider that has experience with this, if you're a family that has experience with this system, please take that survey. Lynn's gonna, if she hasn't already, dropped it in the chat to make sure you get your voices heard on that process and be influential there. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath. So with that, we have three areas of three resources for you. These QR codes are, and if you have any questions or thoughts on any of those stuff, please come off mute or drop it in the chat. There is a link there for the updated childcare desert map that you can play with. The middle one is the paving the way to quality report. And then the final one is just a way to sign up for our regular newsletters and updates. So give everybody a moment to see if there's a question or comment. that good pregnant teacher pause. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Monica. All right. With that, we want to thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Like I said, anybody who registered for this event, you'll get a copy of the slide deck and a copy of the recording and a link to all the resources to be shared in a follow-up email. So we be looking for that. And with that, have a great day. If you're getting rain, enjoy it. If you have sunshine, enjoy that too. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.